10 Tenants Who Murdered Their Landlords. Welcome to Creepshow, where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature and uncover the unsettling stories that keep you up at night. Today we explore a chilling and often overlooked side of tenant-landlord relationships. From regretful crimes of passion to premeditated acts of brutality, these are the tales of 10 tenants who murdered their landlords. Prepare yourself for a journey into the macabre as we unravel the twisted motives and shocking details behind these horrific acts. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest chilling stories. Let's begin. It's time to bring attention to those less-than-ideal tenants in order to counterbalance the recent list of 10 landlords who killed their tenants. In criminal trials, the facts are the same, but the interpretations of the defense and prosecution attorneys disagree. The former asserts that almost all of their clients are innocent, or at most, that their crimes were committed in the context of unusual circumstances. The latter nearly always argue that the offenses were intentional, if not planned. Whereas prosecutors usually want guilty prisoners to face the harshest punishment possible, defense attorneys usually call for clemency. These distinctions are demonstrated by the cases involving the 10 tenants on this list who killed their landlords. Number 10. Alex Garces. Alex Garces, a 23-year-old renter from Queens, New York City, was only sentenced to 3 years in prison for killing his 71-year-old landlord, Edgar Moncayo, presumably because he regretted his action. As per the New York Post story authored by Kevin Sheehan and Priscilla DeGregory, Justice Kenneth Holder of the Queens Supreme Court expressed his disbelief at the degree of regret displayed by Garces. The judge remarked that he rarely sees a defendant apologize and ask forgiveness from the family of the victim, citing his observations from his time in court. The Moncayo family was not as thrilled. Lourdes Moncayo, his daughter, thought the punishment was much too brief. She sobbed and said that Garces had broken my family down forever. Initially, it seems that Garces reported to the authorities that Moncayo had collapsed down the stairs after he had run into the landlord while lugging a mattress out the front door. But following a dispute, Garces was captured on camera pushing the landlord down the stairs by a doorbell security system. After hitting his head on the sidewalk and suffering a catastrophic brain injury, the victim subsequently passed away. Garces had resided upstairs in the house that Moncayo and his wife occupied. The landlord saw that his tenant was struggling to pay the rent, so he lowered it from $400 to $200 a month. The renter did, however, agree to vacate after Garces disregarded the house rules by letting his girlfriend visit, leaving a crying baby alone in the upstairs unit. He came back with a drill along with his 22-year-old brother, Christian Guapi, to reclaim the land and get his stuff. Number 9. Frank Walton. The 42-year-old Frank Walton was determined to kill his 67-year-old landlady. In a Herald Net story, Jake Goldstein Street writes that 2 days after Howard Benzel, 67, vanished in Skagit County, Washington, around a mile north of Lake McMurray, pedestrians found human remains. Medical examiner Dr. J. Matthew Lacey concluded that Benzel died from blunt force trauma, stating that the landlord had been struck at least 25 times. Most likely with a hammer. Additionally, Lacey discovered some evidence of possible bleeding on Benzel's brain and strangulation. When Benzel learned that Walton was residing in the business space, he let out to sell second-hand products and that he had no intention of extending Walton's lease. The landlord and his tenant got into a fight. A month after being found guilty of second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence, Walton received an 18 1/3 year jail term. The memorial service for Howard Benzel drew almost 300 attendees. Number 8. Ashwani Shamlodhiya. Landlord Sichang Michael Lee of West Chicago, Illinois, was not delighted to learn that his renter Ashwani Shamlodhiya was having an extramarital affair with his wife. But Shamlodhiya was the one thinking of murder. Indian native Shamlodhiya, who was employed by Lucent Technologies in Naperville, had been renting a room from Lee and his spouse Wen Susan Lee for around half a year. The two men got into a brawl when Lee questioned Shamlodhiya about the tryst. In the end, Shamlodhiya killed his landlord and committed arson in addition to murder when he set fire to the townhouse in an effort to hide the crime. Shamlodhiya was put through 2 trials. He was found guilty of arson in the first trial, but not of murder. The renter claimed that during their argument, a stranger broke into the house, attacked both men, and then left. In his second trial, he claimed that after being attacked with a knife and hammer, he had struck Lee in self-defense and had then lied to avoid being dishonored. The second trial produced a different result. Shamlodhiya's guilt, according to the prosecution, was envious rather than self-defense related. Out of a possible 60-year term, he received a sentence of 26 years in prison. There was a twist in the continuing tale, though. For the reason that the jurors should not have been told by defense attorneys not to consider an involuntary manslaughter verdict after the trial, judge had said they could consider that option, and the defendant had requested they be allowed to do so. The defendant's murder conviction was reversed on appeal. Shamlodhiya's convictions for first-degree murder and residential arson were ultimately upheld by the Appellate Court of Illinois, which upheld the lower court's decision after considering the appeal. Number 7. Daniel Walsh. The BBC's web story on Daniel Walsh, a lodger, killing his 71-year-old landlord Graham Snell leaves out the question of whether the badgers in a nearby woodland set were in need of food. But the wicked renter dismembered Snell's body and gave some of it to the animals after killing his tenant. He scattered some of the victim's remaining remains throughout the woodland and placed other pieces in a communal bin. Mr. Snell had been absent for more than a week, according to a neighbor. Walsh reported to the police that Snell was dead in his bathroom. At last, the truth was revealed. 10 years prior, Walsh had stolen £5,000 from his landlord, landing him in jail. The renter said that after killing Snell, he became scared and mutilated the dead man's body. Snell complained that Walsh had been stealing from his bank account and staying at his home uninvited, but the police did not document or follow up on this, and as a result, they lost the ball in their investigation of the murder. In addition, the police had disregarded opportunities to save the victim's life by not performing intelligence checks before visiting Mr. Snell's home. Administrative action was taken, the inquiry officer resigned from the force, and a constable was fired. In addition, learning recommendations were accepted and more training was put in place. Walsh was found guilty of murder and given a minimum 27-year jail sentence. Number 6. Gary Lee and Monique Lee. It wasn't just Monique Lee, 28, who strangled her 48-year-old landlord Karen Jenkins. She was assisted. Gary Lee, her 19-year-old younger brother, assisted her by supporting the victim's legs. Additionally, Gary had enticed Jenkins to the flat by pretending to be a potential tenant. It appears that Jenkins presented Monique with eviction papers 2 days prior, and Monique did not seem to enjoy it. Monique was retried and found guilty of first-degree murder and using a weapon to commit a felony following the conclusion of her first trial, which was declared a mistrial. For the murder, Monique received a life term in jail towards the end of 2012. She had just started serving her sentence when she passed away in January 2013 from an unidentified illness. In exchange for testifying against his sister, Gary entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder. However, he was later charged with lying under oath for making contradicting statements while testifying. He was given a term of 65 to 100 years in jail, with the possibility of release in 2043. With a seemingly unfazed expression, he exclaimed, "I am God's child." "God will deliver me," he exclaimed as he was led out of the courtroom. Number 5. John Hamann. Life sentence to prison. No release. John Jack Hamann, a tenant from Middleton, Wisconsin, was given this punishment for killing his 81-year-old landlord, Agnes Bram. It appears that Judge Hyland was appalled by the blatant severity of the act and for that reason refused to grant the defendant parole. A hammer or similar object was Hamann's weapon, according to Danny Maxwell of WCOW.com. The murderer whacked the victim over 6 times on the head before leaving her bloody body for her family to find on the garage floor. The brutality of Bram's murder horrified the landlady's granddaughter Kelly Etter, as well as Bram's daughter Rose Kelso, who informed the killer, You threatened your past landlord in January before you moved into my mom's house with a hunting knife. Because she was afraid you would hit her in the head, your own mother didn't want you to live with her. You don't deserve to be freed. Hamann, who authorities claim battled alcoholism and mental health problems, went on a social media tirade against women before killing Bram. Number 4, Joshua Young. Joshua Young, the tenant, was found guilty of second-degree manslaughter by the jury after being initially charged with first-degree murder. The Louisville, Kentucky tenant was also found guilty of first-degree wanton endangerment and tampering with physical evidence, according to Emily Maher of MLKY News at noon. He had shot and killed his landlord, Shane McCain, following a fight between the two over rent. Young claimed that he had simply been attempting to defend his family when he killed McCain. McCain, according to Young, stormed into his house and made a gun-wielding threat. Young killed his landlord by shooting him 3 times before he ran away. Young received a 6-year term for his offenses. Number 3, Alfano Joshua. Joshua Alfano, who is 23 years old, aspired to be a model. He will instead serve a life sentence without the chance of parole for the kidnapping, robbery, and strangulation of his 67-year-old Torrance, California, landlord Norman Mangus, as noted by Carly Dryden in her Daily Breeze piece. Judge Mark Arnold was unmoved by the defendant in front of him, whom he called a sociopath with no conscience, even though the defendant begged for mercy. Even though Alfano expressed regret for his horrible actions, Judge Arnold noted that Alfano had previously broken into Mangus twice and had a criminal record. Judge Arnold added, "I think you're sorry that you got caught, not for what you did." When Alfano attempted to rob Mangus 3 times with the help of his 21-year-old friend Morgan Tyler DeLange, he didn't let his purported regret stop him from murdering his landlord. According to information provided by the court, DeLange called Mangus to set up a meeting whereby Alfano could give up the stolen goods. The meeting was actually a plot to take Mangus's car and TV. Alfano and DeLange accused one another during the trial, but they both acknowledged carrying the body and taking the landlord's vehicle. The horrifying brutality of the murder is revealed by Dryden's account of it. One or both of the defendants kicked and punched Mangus, strangled him with a belt, and shoved a ski mask in his mouth. Asphyxia claimed his life. His body was moved by both men to the side of the home, where it stayed until police found it 4 days later. Regarding the motivation, Alfano and DeLange were referred to as Team Greed by Deputy District Attorney Erica Jerez. Number 2, Daniel Briceno Garcia, Daniel Briceno. According to an MSN story, Garcia, 46, became paranoid about COVID and killed Sonia Butron Calvi, 66, and Edgar Aguilera Daza, 60, by stabbing them. The couple had sublet apartments in their South London house to 5 other people. After hearing yelling, one of the other tenants said she went to her bedroom and saw Daza being repeatedly stabbed in the stomach while the defendant held him around the neck. Garcia then attacked Calvi. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered a bloodbath at the rental home. Calvi was found face down in the kitchen, holding a clenched knife, while Daza was discovered in a pool of blood in the corridor. Garcia maintained that he was hearing voices and suffered from mental illness, but a jury determined that he had committed manslaughter and 2 counts of murder. Garcia received a life sentence with a minimum of 33 years in jail. Number 1, Karl Bestford. It's ironic that the renter who attempted to have his 46-year-old landlord, Karl Bestford, beheaded was employed at a slaughterhouse. He failed to perform the objective, leaving his victim mutilated and stabbed instead of headless despite his employment. He did succeed in killing Meach during the procedure, for which he was given a life sentence. In the Bensham neighborhood of Gateshead, England, the tenant invited his landlord to his Rayleigh Grove apartment. There, Bestford took out a knife and repeatedly stabbed Meach. The jury found him guilty even though he had pleaded not guilty. According to the Northumbria police, by doing this, the jurors removed a violent and dangerous criminal from the community. The main investigator, Detective Chief Inspector Paul Young, said, This was a vicious attack on a respectable member of the community who was just going about his business. These stories remind us of the dark and unpredictable nature of humanity. From remorseful confessions to acts of sheer brutality, the line between tenant and landlord can sometimes blur into a deadly encounter. Thank you for joining us on this unsettling journey through the minds of these killers. If you found this video intriguing, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Creepshow for more tales of the eerie and unexplained. Comment below with your thoughts on these cases and let us know which stories you want to hear next. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.